Welcome everybody, this is Garrett. Welcome back to my channel, and the video I'm going to talk about today is going to be another rewind video, basically telling stories and nostalgia on one movie in particular, and that movie is Fright Night. Now, I did another one of these videos before, basically talking about memories that I had regarding Halloween specials that I watched as a kid. You can find that video down below. And that was going through just the old VHS tapes of all the Halloween specials I watched growing up and the stories behind them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about this movie, which is actually one of the movies that got me into the horror genre as a child. So it was one of those, I guess you would call them like the gateway movies, right? So one thing in particular kind of opened my eyes to this movie at a very young age. Now, I've talked about this a little bit before, but my uncle was really the one who got me into horror movies in general. He had tons of posters and props and VHS tapes, and he used to show them to me as a young kid, and I was just, enamored with them, really. I just dug them. I don't know what it was. I remember in elementary school, we used to have library class, and I would go check out, like, Universal Monster books and just go home and check those things out. And, I was always into R.L. Stine books as a kid. When we had to choose books to read, those were always the ones that I really enjoyed. And that was before Goosebumps. So Goosebumps kind of came a little bit later. It was like R.L. Stine. There was, a book called Hit and Run, The Snowman. I actually still own a lot of those books from my childhood too. That would be another cool video to get through. But what we're going to talk about today is Fright Night. And there's one thing in particular that opened my eyes to this movie at a very, very young age. And I have that thing here. And a lot of you may know exactly what this is. So if you check this out, this is a card. They were called Fright Flicks. My uncle ended up buying me like a whole box of these as a kid. And I remember in my garage going through them and seeing all those crazy, movie stills of all these crazy movies with these funny taglines underneath. And me as a kid, I wasn't sure exactly what these were, so I wasn't sure what this was. I just remember seeing this picture and being like, oh my god, what is this? And the tagline saying that my soup is hot. I mean, I didn't know they were trying to be funny. I thought maybe that was a quote in the movie. But I just remember seeing that picture and being like, oh my god, what is this? And on the back, it actually says Fright Night. So I still was very, very young, so I didn't even realize that that was the title of the movie. I just thought it said Fright Night on the back. I'm not sure exactly what it meant. So fast forward a couple of years, tradition for me every Saturday was to watch Saturday morning cartoons and wait for WWF Superstars to come on at 11 o'clock where I grew up. After that was over, it would be about noontime, and it must have been around Halloween where they used to just play horror movies on cable, like on the same station that Superstars was on. And I used to watch them all the time, and that's kind of how I got introduced to a lot of horror movies at a young age, is I would see them on TV. So obviously they were edited to TV at the time. But I can remember one was Fright Night, and then it was actually Fright Night 2 was a back-to-back with this movie. So I saw Fright Night 1 and Fright Night 2 at the exact same time on like a back-to-back Saturday afternoon, probably around October. So I just fell in love with both of those movies, especially the first one. I just loved the story. I talked about this before. It's just a general story of like, a next door neighbor that you think has done something. I know they've done other movies like this. I talked about it before. They just recently did that Summer of '84 where it's a very similar concept where, they think their next door neighbor's a murderer. Well, same thing here. They think the next door neighbor is a vampire. So he's doing everything he can to try to prove himself, to show everybody that this guy is a vampire. And I just thought, that next door neighbor suburbs type of vibe always just kind of stuck with me. Even shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark had a very similar episode where there was vampires that lived across the street. And I was just always, that was always one of my favorites as well. So I'm just really into that kind of storyline, topic, plot, okay? I know Disturbia has a very similar one. I actually saw another movie very recently called Night Visitor, and it was a Blu-ray I picked up from Vinegar Syndrome, I believe. No, actually, you know what? I think it was from Severin. Night Visitor, but it has a very similar concept as Fright Night and all those type of movies there. So it's definitely one to check out if you guys haven't seen it. It's called Night Visitor. It's from the 80s, I believe. So, getting back to Fright Night, I ended up recording them off TV as a kid, and I would always watch the television versions all the time growing up. So then when I got older and, I had my own money and DVDs were just becoming really popular, and I bought a DVD player. I'm not sure exactly what I saved up for. Maybe it was a high school graduation gift I bought myself after getting money. I don't remember. But I do know that the first DVD that I ever bought was Fright Night. So this was the first DVD I ever bought was Fright Night. So this came out, I'm going to try to see, 1998. So it does make sense that that maybe I did purchase this right after I graduated high school. That was in 99, if I'm going to date myself. So yeah, this was the first DVD I bought with my DVD player. So that was the first thing I bought kind of as a bundle. And of course it was, being one of my favorites, I only had the TV version. So I never even had that movie on VHS before the DVD. I do have it on VHS now, sealed. I do have part 2 sealed on VHS now. I did buy them at VHS later, at a thrift store or something like that I had sold. But I did have this first, and this was the first time I think I'd ever seen the movie untelevised. I'm not sure exactly what was different. I forget at the time, but it's just a movie that always stuck with me. It stuck with me so much that I made sure that was the first movie I bought on DVD. So as we start to move on here, I know Fright Night 2 has been getting a lot of talks in the news recently. I know that Tom Holland actually is trying to produce a new Fright Night 2, I guess, called Resurrection. I'm excited for it in the sense that I just like the characters, but I'm fine with Fright Night 2 as is. To go back, and I'm not sure if they're trying to pretend it didn't happen. I hate when people do that. Just, guys, stop rewriting history. It has characters from the first movie. They talk about the sister of Jerry Dandridge in part 2. I mean, leave it alone. If you want to call it Fright Night Resurrection, by all means, go for it. That's fine, but to call it Fright Night 2 to me just doesn't make sense because it has to fall in that same universe. Maybe it's a parallel, type of universe. Like, hey, this is what these guys were doing while these guys were doing this, or whatever it may be. But to try to erase the second one to me, it just kind of sucks. So getting to part 2, again, I always was a huge fan of it because I saw it exactly when I saw part 1. And I thought it was great, and I thought it was pretty good as far as, taking off pretty much, not right where the first one left off, but years later. So having the same characters in there, more or less, was, definitely a plus for me. So with that being said, I want to talk about that DVD. Now, Fright Night 2 DVD is one of those DVDs that people have been after for a long time. I remember when I first got into collecting DVDs, I used to see this everywhere. I would see it at Best Buy, at Newbury Comics, which we have over here. And I was just into collecting so much, and I only had a certain amount of income at that time. So it always was one of those titles that I kind of felt like, hey, I'll get it eventually, right? So this is, and I talked about this before, this is the legit DVD copy, the one that, is very, very out of print and has been very sought after for a long period of time. So, like I said, I kind of kept putting this off. I'm trying to see exactly when this one was released. Oh, 2003, actually. This was released, 2003. So, I did see this around, and for whatever reason, I just, passed it up thinking I would get it eventually, and then all of a sudden it was just gone. And I can remember going to a horror convention maybe a couple of years after this was released, and I remember seeing bootlegs of it at all the tables and thinking to myself, why is there so many bootlegs of this movie? And come to find out, everybody's like, oh, you can't find that, it's long out of print, it's gone. And I can remember going on eBay and looking around and saying, oh my god, like, how am I going to obtain this? The thing is going for big money. So I had a bright idea, is that I was going to go on a quest to find this movie. Now, the bright idea that I had was I already knew that this movie wasn't going to be in stores unless I went to a used video store and it just happened to come across it. I knew I wasn't going to pay eBay bucks at that time. So what I ended up doing was I ended up traveling to all the video stores in my area. I would run right to the horror section, try to see if they had Fright Night 2, and they didn't. Next one, same thing, they didn't. Finally, I was with some friends and my girlfriend at the time, and I remember going to one in like the next state over, and on the shelf was Fright Night 2 for rental. Okay, it was in the horror section for rental. So I remember seeing it, and I went up to the person at the register and I said, hey, what happens if I don't return this movie? And they were kind of looking at me confused, like, well, what do you mean? I said, I want this movie, and I know I'm going to check it out, and I'm not going to bring it back. How much would I have to pay if I just decided never to bring it back? And they were looking at me like I had six heads, and I think they might have just said like $20 or something like that. And I said, okay, can I just buy it outright right now? And the guy said, yeah, sure. Do you want to take the box with you? And I said, yeah, of course. So he said, okay. So I bought this straight up from Blockbuster Video, straight off the shelf in, I don't know what year it was. It was probably 2006, maybe. And that's how I obtained this. And I had never seen this again in all my travels of, used DVD sections and all this other stuff. I'd never seen this again out in the wild since then. And it was one of those things where I think it's a pretty cool story because it just shows at the time on how things could have been done. I mean, even that early, like Amazon wasn't that big of a thing then, and eBay was big. But to still be able to go out in stores and try to find these things, I thought it was a pretty cool way to get it, was to attack the big box video stores at the time. So that's how I obtained this movie. And it's not one of my favorite movies, but I think it's a really, really good sequel if anybody has not checked it out. Personally, I have, the movie poster for this, and I have the other original one sheet of this, which I'll show. With the cooler artwork, in my opinion, which really just kind of stems off of the artwork of part 1. So what I'll do right now is I'll just show you guys a glimpse of that one sheet with the cooler artwork. Alright, so that's my one sheet of Fright Night 2 with the artwork that I personally like the best, right? I think it's a real cool, with those two movie posters kind of sitting side by side. They go perfectly together. Again, just another reason why I think that these two movies should not be split up and part 2 kind of be forgotten about if that's the plan going forward. So, as we move on, with Fright Night in general, being a big fan of it, I did, I was so excited when the Blu-ray was released from Twilight Time. I ended up buying both versions. It came with a magnet, then it came out with like a special edition, I think I have right here. It's like an anniversary edition. It has a little bit of special features, but nothing too crazy. I think for a movie like this, I think that we could get a better version eventually. So, yeah, this comes with just a little sheet. You got a little magnet in here. So, I was excited, nonetheless, to get that because, again, the only other version I had was that DVD that I bought when I first got my DVD player. So it was long overdue, personally. And I know that Fright Night 2 does not have a release here. I know it has one, overseas, I believe, that maybe you can play here. I did go over all this in a past video talking about movies that need upgrades. So I did kind of get into more detail about that. But I do have a Blu-ray of Fright Night 2. Now, this was actually given to me. And, it's works region free disc. HD. The quality is really good. So for now, this works for me. And this actually has that same cooler artwork there. So this works for me for now, but I do think that something's going to give where, that movie gets its proper release. Now, as we start moving forward here, I talked about I have the VHSs, I have the DVDs, I have the posters. I also was lucky enough a couple of years ago to go down to Mad Monster Party where they were doing a Fright Night reunion. And I was able to get my poster all signed by pretty much the whole cast. I will show that now. All right, so that was pretty much the whole cast that was there. That signed that poster, which is pretty much all the main characters that are still alive. It was definitely a cool experience for sure. I was also able to get a photo op here with Evil Ed in makeup, so that was kind of cool as well to get that done. He was always a real favorite of mine as a character growing up as a kid. So it was cool to kind of get that done as well. I don't do a lot of those kind of photo ops, but I just thought it was a very different, photo op. Now, I went there with my buddy Pizzal. You guys probably know him. He has a good channel, so if you do not, check it out. And yeah, it was a great time, man. The cast kind of talked about all the different stuff that went on, during the filming of Fright Night. And they kind of briefed a little bit on Fright Night 2 and, how Jerry Dandridge wasn't actually even considered for the movie at all. And I guess now with the new one that they're talking about, that he is going to be a primary character there. So that's an interesting topic too, because now we can get into the remakes, which, I don't care for them that much. I actually saw this. This is the 3D, Fright Night 3D. I saw this in 3D, I think the night it came out. It was actually funny because the night I met Chris Sarandon for the first time at Monster Mania was the night that this came out. And I can remember going to meet him, telling him we were going to see it. He kind of like smirked, and then we went and checked it out, and he actually made a cameo in the movie. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. And then I do have this Fright Night 2, and honestly, I don't remember anything about it. I watched it when I first got it. I think they would go to college over, out of the country maybe. But I remember zero about it. I don't think it was something I really cared for. Being a fan of the franchise, I bought them anyways. And, a couple other things I want to talk about really quick is it's a movie that doesn't have a lot of, memorabilia or props or any cool collectibles. They did come out with this documentary that came with a book. So I do have that book and this documentary about both films, which is actually a really, really good documentary. And it's You're So Cool, Brewster. And it's long, guys. It's a long documentary. It's got a ton of stuff in it. It comes with a big hardcover book that kind of follows along and talks about all the stuff they talk about in here. So if you guys can find that, I say check it out. It's really cool. Good stuff in there. Now, the other thing that I do own is the soundtrack on vinyl. So this is the original Fright Night soundtrack on vinyl. What an awesome soundtrack and score this movie has. It's incredible. The score itself, awesome. The soundtrack and songs, awesome. So I would definitely track that down. The whole thing is excellent. I'm not sure if, Waxwork put out anything for Fright Night. I don't have it. I only own the original soundtrack for it. But like I said, definitely one to check out. So another thing that I do have in my collection here pertaining to that, like I said, there is not a lot of collectibles for this movie. So there's a couple artists out there I collect as well, some kind of, alternate movie art posters, some screen prints that these artists draw. And there's two good ones that I have for Fright Night, and I will try to show them next. It is one by Stephen Holiday, great artist. He did one of Evil Ed, super cool. The detail is amazing. And then Matt Ryan Tobin did a really, really cool Fright Night one as well that I own. And those two artists are killer, and those two prints are killer. If you guys can come across them, I'll try to show those now. All right, so yeah, as you can see, those things really pop. Great artwork on those. And really quick, the last thing that I want to talk about as far as any kind of collectible that I was able to find is if you grew up, in the 80s, you probably remember those pillow people. I don't know if you remember those things. Mainly they were, I guess, more for girls. I never owned one as a kid, but I own one now, and it is an Evil Ed pillow person, I guess. Now, this was a cool concept because, I'm really into nostalgia and all things, 80s and 90s I just really am fond of. Seeing the design of those pillow people, which I remember my neighbor, she had some of those growing up, and, converted into now, like, characters from movies that I care about, like Evil Ed. It was a no-brainer. I had to get that thing and display it out here in my movie room. So, cool item that I'm not sure if anybody has or they even know about, but it's from a company called Horror Decor. So if it is something you like, I'm not sure if they're still available. I know they had like a Reagan one as well, so definitely something cool to check out. That's pretty different, right? So again, with that being said, Fright Night and Fright Night 2, I would say definite go-tos. Again, the practical effects in Fright Night is still honestly some of the best. Some of the best. I know Steve Johnson worked on it and some other people, but some of the best practical effects, I mean, they're still creepy to this day as they were when I was, 10 years old watching it for the first time. So, gang, thank you guys for coming to check out. As you can see right here, I also have a Fright Night Fever shirt. This is a Fright Rags exclusive. They did this print for April Fool's Day this year. Not sure if it's still around, but check it out. It's really cool. It's a mashup with Fright Night and Saturday Night Fever with the scene of Amy and Jerry Dandridge dancing at the club. So, guys, I don't want to ramble on too long. I tried to cram a lot of stuff within a half hour's time. We're running about 25 minutes right now. But hey, thank you guys so much for checking this out. This was another Rewind, talking all things Fright Night. For real.